So my presentation is called Uncommon Valor at Iwo Jima. And I first became fascinated by the topic of the Battle of Iwo Jima after reading Flags of Our Fathers, which is a book about the flag raising at Iwo Jima. And I had the opportunity to write a senior thesis about the battle. So I took the opportunity, and I just became more and more fascinated by the battle the more I learned. So I just wanted to share some of what I learned. I think everyone's going to find it really interesting. Okay, so Iwo Jima, it was discovered by Englishmen in 1673, and it was named Sulphur Island due to the sulfur deposits that are on the island. It was explored by Russians in 1805, but Iwo Jima, it went unclaimed by the English and Russians due to the lack of resources on the island. It was finally colonized by the Japanese in 1853 after Admiral Perry's visit to Japan, and the Japanese wanted to colonize all territories in their region before the West did. So that's why it was finally colonized. By 1943, there was a civilian population of 1,091 people. So there were certain vegetables that were grown. Sugar cane could be grown, but rice had to be exported. Okay, and Iwo Jima, it's 625 miles north of Saipan, where a U.S. base was built during the war, and 600 miles south of Tokyo. So it's kind of like in between the two territories, which made it an ideal base for the American forces. It's 4 2/3 miles long and 2.5 miles wide, which makes it about 7.5 square miles. And it's described as looking like a pork chop by a Marine officer. I think when you see a map of it, you'll agree. Okay, and Mount Suribachi is to the south of the island, and it's an extinct volcano that is 556 feet high. Okay, and it's where the flag raisings took place. On the beach, there's black volcanic ash, which gave Marines a lot of trouble when they're trying to walk or invade the island. It really slowed them down as they're running up on the beach. Okay, and there's a lot of steam vents, being that Iwo Jima is a volcanic island, and that gave it an unpleasant smell when it mixed with this sulfur. There's no natural bodies of water, and this was a problem for Japanese soldiers who were hidden underground and weren't able to access water. To the north of the island, there's rocky cliffs and ridges that range from 340 feet to 382 feet high. And the geothermal heat in Iwo Jima could reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which was a problem for Japanese soldiers who dug tunnels into the island. And this is a photograph of Mount Suribachi. Okay, and this is where the flag raisings took place. I'm sure you all can notice the green vegetation. Okay, that was planted on the island after the battle was over. During the battle, Iwo Jima was mostly gray and black. Okay, in a strategy of the American forces in the Pacific area of World War II was something called island hopping. Okay, and this was a tactic for the Allied forces to advance toward Japan by capturing islands. So this was done in two different regions. It was done in the Southwest Area Command under General Douglas MacArthur, and he had operational control over the Solomon Islands, which included Guadalcanal, New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines. And the Central Pacific area was under Admiral Nimitz, and he had control over operations in the Gilbert Islands, which Tarawa is a part of, same with the Marshall Islands, the Mariana Islands, which Guam, Saipan, and Tinian are a part of, and also the Bunyan Islands, which Iwo Jima is a part of. And there were certain islands that were bypassed. Okay, but these islands were cut off from all supplies, so the Japanese forces on certain islands were pretty much just marooned there. Okay, and the islands with airfields were generally attacked and invaded. Okay, so the decision to invade Iwo Jima was made in October of 1944. Okay, Iwo Jima, as I mentioned before, was a strategic location during World War II. Okay, and the Americans, they wanted to neutralize radar stations and also to destroy Japanese fighters that were stationed on Iwo Jima. And it became a safety net for damaged B-29s that bombed Japan. Okay, and this is a map of the Allied advance towards Iwo Jima on their way to Japan. And as you notice, there's an arrow from the Mariana Islands to Iwo Jima, and that was where bases were built. There is numerous B-29 aircraft bases that were built, and the aircraft there bombed Japan. Okay, so early in the war, there was a modest-sized defense by the Japanese on Iwo Jima. In 1943, there was 3,800 soldiers, 1,500 naval air force personnel, and 22 planes. But after the Mariana Islands were captured, the defense increased. By February of 1945. There was 22,000 Army and Navy forces. And the Japanese, they built hundreds of pillboxes and blockhouses that were made of concrete. They had weapons such as artillery, anti-tank guns, mortars, dug-in tanks, and minefields. And this is an estimated arsenal of the weapons that they had. Okay, and the Japanese, they dug approximately 3 miles of tunnels. They planned for 17 miles of tunnels, but the Americans invaded before this could happen. Inside Mount Suribachi, I showed a photograph of Mount Suribachi before. There were 7 stories of tunnels that were built. There was a communication bunker that was 75 feet underground, and a hospital that was underground that could hold up to 400 patients. Okay, and this is a photograph of a Japanese artillery piece on Mount Suribachi. Okay, the Japanese general that was in charge of defenses at Iwo Jima was General Tadamichi Kobayashi. And he actually studied in the United States from 1928 to 1930. He was actually very popular, and he had a lot of American friends. Okay, but he was a Japanese soldier, and he was loyal to his country, so he obviously fought for the Japanese during World War II. and he becomes the commanding general of Iwo Jima on June 8th, 1944. He writes these courageous battle vows, and these are given to each Japanese soldier. So they are: we shall defend this island with all out efforts. We shall overrun the enemy tanks with explosives and destroy them. We shall not die until we have killed 10 of the enemy. We shall continue to harass the enemy with guerrilla tactics. Even if only one of us remains alive, we shall infiltrate the enemy and annihilate them. We shall kill the enemy with a one-shot, one-kill approach. And this is why the battle went on for so long. It went for 36 days, and the Japanese soldiers, they really abided by these vows. So a tactic that Kobayashi used was to allow the Americans to land on Iwo Jima, and then once the beaches had become crowded, then he would launch his attack. And he prohibited banzai charges that occurred at other islands in the Pacific, and these were suicidal attacks. So Kobayashi, he wanted his soldiers to fight till the very end, until they were out of ammunition. Okay, there is a 72-day preliminary bombardment that began in August of 1944. So there were raids almost daily on Iwo Jima. Sometimes more than one raid occurred. Okay, and these raids, they were successful in destroying the airfields and aircraft, but they didn't hit camouflage positions. So they missed a lot of positions that the Japanese had built. And as you can see, this Japanese officer thought that they might as well not even come, okay, which is an exaggeration, I'm sure, but it just goes to show how the raids were pretty meaningless. Okay, and the airfields, they were neutralized for the most part, but hundreds of defenses went untouched. And then there's another bombardment that begins on February 16th, 3 days before the attack. Okay, and this is a photograph before the invasion, a couple months before the battle. And I thought this was unique because it shows Japanese soldiers above ground, which for the most part they weren't during the battle. Okay, before the invasion, there was a UDT reconnaissance mission. Okay, and the underwater demolition teams, they were pre-Navy SEALs. Like, this is what the Navy SEALs are now. Okay, and they swam to Iwo Jima on February 17th, 2 days before the battle. And 11 out of their 12 vessels were hit during their operation, and 9 were put out of action and 1 sunk, and there was 200 casualties, and 1 UDT member was lost. And this shows how the preliminary bombardment was such a failure. Okay, and this is a photograph of the landing plan that the United States used to invade Japan. So the 5th Division and the 4th Division were responsible for invading Japan, and later the 3rd Division would invade. But the 5th Division, they landed from Green to Red Beach, and then the 3rd Division, and then the 4th Division landed between Yellow and Blue Beach. The 5th Division was responsible for capturing Mount Suribachi and then advancing up the left-hand side on the island, and the 4th was responsible for taking positions on the right-hand side. And then the 3rd Division, they were responsible for capturing the 2nd airfield and beyond that. Okay, so D-Day on Iwo Jima was February 19th, 1945. There was additional bombardments at 6:40 and then at 8 o'clock. And then the 4th and the 5th Marines, they landed at 09:02. So the Japanese waited until the beach was crowded and then opened fire. So the 3,000-yard beach was pre-registered with artillery. And as correspondent Robert Sherrard states, they died with the greatest possible violence. So besides artillery, there was also pillboxes surrounding the beach and towards the north on northern plateaus and also on Mount Suribachi, and they just had the beach honed in. Okay, and the Marines and naval personnel, they suffered 2,420 casualties out of, and 501 were killed out of this number. But the Marines are able to land 30,000 of their forces. Okay, and this is a photograph of the damage to naval vessels and also landing craft. Okay, so there was hundreds of acts of bravery, but I just wanted to spotlight a couple. So to help secure the beach and move beyond the beach, Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, who he earned the Medal of Honor at Guadalcanal, but he came back to fight with Marines at Iwo Jima. He leads Marines off the beach, and then he successfully takes an enemy blockhouse while other Marines are pinned down, and they're trying to literally like dig into the island. He leads Marines off the beach, but unfortunately he's killed in action. There's also Tony Stein, who he used a improvised type of machine gun to kill dozens of Japanese fighters and to neutralize several pillboxes. But unfortunately, he's killed a couple days later as well. There's air and naval support that's coordinated with radio men, which are successful in destroying numerous positions. Eventually, tanks, rocket vehicles, and flamethrower tanks are able to land, and this helps to neutralize more positions so that the Marines are able to take the beach. Okay, Combat Team 28 of the 5th Division was responsible for securing Mount Suribachi. So they wanted to destroy the Japanese guns on the mountain and deny the Japanese a observation post for the rest of the island. So the whole mountain was well defended. I noticed that I stated before that there were 7 stories of tunnels. Okay, and there was also defenses on the base of the mountain. So the Marines, they used fire teams to secure positions, and in the fire teams, there were machine gunners, flamethrower operators, and also demolition teams. Okay, and there's a lot of fire support that was needed to take Mount Suribachi from artillery, rocket trucks, and coordinated fire. One of hundreds of acts of bravery was done by Private First Class Donald J. Roll, who threw himself onto a satchel charge to save Sergeant Hank Hansen. And Mount Suribachi is taken in 4 days, and the Combat Team 28 suffers 519 casualties. Okay, and 2 days into the battle for Iwo Jima, there was a kamikaze attack by 50 Japanese planes, and they strike 3 aircraft carriers, and the Bismarck Sea sinks. Okay, and this is a photograph of the battle for Mount Suribachi. Okay, so This is kind of what Iwo Jima has become known for, the famous flag raising photograph. So at Mount Suribachi, it's captured on February 23rd, and there's 2 flag raisings that take place. So Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson orders a platoon up Mount Suribachi, and he tells his platoon, if you get to the top, put it, meaning an American flag, on the top. So the platoon is successful in doing this, and a flag is raised. So on the beach, there's a Secretary of the Navy that spots this flag going up, and he states, I want that American flag. So Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson, he orders another flag raising so that the Marines can keep the original flag that was raised, and then the second photograph would go, I mean, the second flag would go to the Secretary of the Navy. So these are the Marines and corpsmen that were in the first flag raising, and the Marines that were in the second flag raising. So for a while, it was believed that Rene Gagnon and John Bradley were in the second flag raising, but it was later discovered that, in fact, there was other Marines that were in the second flag raising, and this was Private First Class Harold Keller and Private First Class Harold Schultz. And this was discovered around 2016. Okay, as you can see in this photograph, the first flag that was raised is being taken down while the second flag is going up. Okay, and this is the famous photograph that was taken by Joe Rosenthal. Okay, and this is a clip about the flag raisings on Mount Suribachi and a little bit about the battle for Iwo Jima. So I'm going to play this.
It doesn't seem to be opening up. Are you seeing it, Mike?
Oh, you didn't see it?
No.
Oh.
Did it show up for you? Were you seeing it? Oh, no, it's not on the screen.
No, okay. All right, I'll move on. Okay. So after the 5th Marines, they captured Mount Suribachi, they headed north, and they faced the defenses at Hill 362A. Okay, and this was a fortified hill with tunnels throughout it and a cliff that was as high as 80 feet high up. And the hill was defended by 800 Japanese soldiers, and there was pillboxes and various defensive positions that were throughout the hill. Okay, and there's also Japanese spotters that could call in artillery and mortar fire. Okay, and to capture the hill, the Marines, they use tanks and also flamethrower tanks. So flamethrower tanks were pretty much tanks that had flamethrowers in them. They were invented during World War II and implemented around 1944. Okay, and there was a lot of supporting fire from a destroyer and cruiser named the Nevada and the Pensacola, and there was rocket trucks that helped secure this position. Captain Gove Wilkins, he personally directs fire at positions on the hill until he's mortally wounded. And the fight for Hill 362A goes from February 27th to March 3rd. Okay, and 3 of the flag raisers are killed for the Battle of Hill 362A. There's Hank Hansen, who was in the first flag raising, and then Mike Schrank and Harlan Block, who were also killed in action. And by the end of the fighting for Hill 362A, the 28th Marines, they suffer 1,952 casualties, and the 27th Marines, who also fought for this hill, they suffered 1,319 casualties. So that was from the invasion to the capture of this hill. Okay, and this is a photograph of Marines advancing up the slopes of Hill 362A. Okay, there was also defenses that were around the second airfield. So the second airfield, it was heavily defended with mines, including aerial torpedoes. There's anti-tank positions and defenses overlooking the airfield. So initially, the 4th Marines, they were responsible for capturing the second airfield, but the 3rd Marine Division lands on February 24th to assist in the capture of the second airfield. Okay, so Lieutenant Raoul Archibald, he leads a charge across the second airfield without tank support. Somehow he gets across and, he's able to gain territory with his Marines with no tank support or anything. It was just like a bayonet charge. So it was incredibly heroic. There's also Corporal Herschel Woody Williams, who neutralizes 7 Japanese pillboxes with 6 different flamethrowers. So a flamethrower could only fire for about 7 seconds before it went empty. So Williams, he had to refill his flamethrower 6 different times. And other Marines, they direct tank fire at Japanese positions. So the defenses around the second airfield are not captured until February 28th. And by the end of the fighting in February, there are 7,758 casualties suffered by the Americans. Okay, and this is a photograph of a flamethrower operator at defenses overlooking the second airfield. Another series of defenses were called the meat grinder. Okay, and these were pretty much 3 different defensive positions called Hill 3-2, the Amphitheater, and also Turkey Knob. Major General Sanada of the Japanese was responsible for these series of defenses. So he created machine gun positions, anti-tank positions, and there was mortars in this region too that were as large as 320 millimeter. And they were able to deliver accurate fire from various positions in rocky cliffs. And there was also mines that were placed in strategic locations. Okay, and there's thousands of yards of tunnels in these positions. Okay, so hundreds of rockets were fired at the meat grinder to capture it. There's thousands of gallons of napalm from flamethrowers that were used. There was an attack on March 2nd without the standard preliminary bombardment that captured the Japanese by surprise, so the Marines were able to gain territory. Private Douglas T. Jacobson, he personally destroys 16 Japanese positions with a bazooka. Okay, and the fighting for the meat grinder goes from February 25th to March 4th. And the 4th Marine Division, they suffer 2,880 casualties by the end of the fighting for the meat grinder. Okay, and the Japanese, they're down to 1,100 of 22,000 fighters. Okay, and this is a photograph of one of the sections of the meat grinder, Hill 382. And you can notice how steep the cliffs are. Okay, and this is another photograph of the position. Okay, another position towards the north of Iwo Jima was something called the Gorge. Okay, and the Marines, they had to fire 10,000 gallons of napalm into this position to finally secure it. Okay, because there were so many tunnels that were built into this position. So it took a long time for the Marines to capture it. By mid-March, the Japanese had started to run out of ammunition. So there's suicidal charges. The Japanese, they launched a suicidal charge on March 8th. And 1,500 fighters took part in this. And some were just armed with bamboo spears. And the Japanese, they targeted flamethrower and bulldozer tanks. So the bulldozer tanks, those were used to fill in Japanese tunnels and other positions. And in this phase of the battle, Franklin Selassie, who was one of the flag raisers, he's killed in action. Okay, and this is a photograph of a bulldozer tank that was used. Okay, and this is a map of the progress of the battle. And you can see that it's very difficult to follow because of all the tunnels and defensive positions. So there, on certain days, there's just around like 100 yards of territory that were gained. So that's why the lines don't really move that much on certain parts of the battlefield. Okay, so there's a final attack on Iwo Jima. This is the less significant action, and this was on March 26th at 1600. So the Japanese, they launched a surprise attack, and they mostly attacked P-51 pilots who were then stationed on Iwo Jima. So General Kobayashi, he rallied his troops, and he states, "I will always be at your head." And he's actually never found after the battle. So there's many pilots that are killed in their sleep. And Seabees and remaining Marines that are still on the island fight off the attackers, because by this point in the battle, a lot of the Marines, they think the battle is pretty much over. So they just think that there's some mopping up operations, but this attack completely captures the Americans by surprise. So pretty much all the Japanese soldiers that take part in this attack are killed in action. And 18 are captured. Okay, and the Americans have suffered 50 killed and 100 wounded. Okay, so the cost of taking Iwo Jima was incredibly high. The Marines and naval personnel, they suffered 6,821 killed in action, 19,217 wounded in action, and 2,648 suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after the battle. The Japanese, they pretty much lose every soldier that was on the island during the battle. There's some that are captured who are mostly laborers, and also those that are wounded that can't fight back are captured. After the island is captured, the army kills an additional 1,602 Japanese soldiers that are hiding out, and they take 867 prisoner. And there's 27 medals of honor that are awarded to naval and marine forces on the island, and a lot of them are awarded posthumously for acts of bravery that cost the Marines and naval personnel their lives. And there's 2 Japanese soldiers that don't surrender until January 6, 1949, and they survive pretty much by finding American food and gathering water. So they mostly are able to sneak around on the island and get American rations. Okay, so the purpose of taking Iwo Jima is achieved. So there is 2,251 B-29s that land on Iwo Jima. That saves the lives of 24,661 B-29 crews. And there's also P-51 fighters that are then able to be stationed on Iwo Jima that protects B-29 bombers. And the first B-29 actually lands on Iwo Jima during the battle. Okay, and a Marine who sees the crew kissing the ground, they literally kiss the ground. They're so thankful to be alive and being able to land on Iwo Jima. This Marine, he stays a mile or two to the north for 3 Marine divisions who thought the place was hell on earth. It's ground not even good enough to spit on, which is a very understandable statement. Okay, and this is a photograph of Iwo Jima after it was captured by the Americans, and you can see a lot of aircraft that were stationed after Iwo Jima was taken. Okay, so these are some of the recommended books that I use for my research, and anyone that wants more of an understanding about Iwo Jima should take a look at these books. I can actually email this presentation that's anyone's interested in learning more and wants to read these books. I can email this presentation. Okay, and these are some of the recommended movies and documentaries. Yeah, so they made a movie from Flags of Our Fathers. Okay, and Letters of Iwo Jima is also a good movie. There's some dramatizations, but they're still excellent movies. And these 2 documentaries, Battle Rest Iwo Jima and Iwo Jima 36 Days of Hell, are really good too. The Battle Rest is really interesting because a American historian actually journeys throughout Iwo Jima, and he actually goes inside Japanese tunnels. So now I'll open this presentation up to questions. Let me just exit. Okay, so does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm Eva. I
Hi.
took a few notes, but
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely interesting. Well, it's a war. It's terrible, but
Yeah.
the history, it's really, it grips you, really. Now, and the mode of different weapons, this is unimaginable. I mean, beginning with the flamethrowers and the special tanks, and then some of the Japanese used bamboo sticks.
Yeah.
So you see a whole variety of weapons, whatever man could imagine. Amazing.
Mhm. Yeah.
The other thing is, which is very pretty bad, that they had to use this poisonous gas, that napalm.
Oh,
Napalm,
yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce it exactly.
Yeah, well, that's
10,000
flames.
gallon. That's a gas. That's a gas
It's flames.
of flames.
It's like a flamethrower. That's from a flamethrower.
So that was against some vehicles, not persons, direct or persons.
Yeah, so it's flames. The napalm is a type of flame.
Right.
Yeah.
Then what else was, what was the name of that movie? Clint Eastwood or somebody?
Yeah.
What's the name? I don't know. What was the name of?
Yeah, they're called Flags of Our Fathers and Letters of Iwo Jima.
But those are books, no? They're
There's
movies.
they're movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So I think it would be nice, would have been good that more young people would have come.
Yeah.
They don't know much about history, I have a feeling. And they say the past has a future.
Mm-hmm.
So
It
people
repeats itself.
should know more about what happened before. So when I was growing up in Hungary, in socialist, communist Hungary, well, I was already there as a small child during the World War II. So I remember even today the bombings. We were all in the basement, people screaming, the walls were moving, but we didn't know whether it was German or Russian planes. We just knew we were bombed. And it was very, very scary, the sirens. Even today, I don't like the sirens. And of course, I did not understand at the time what was war. It was just very bad. But I remember one word which relates to this. I heard always people talking about kamikazes. And they are basically performing suicide, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Acts of suicide. And another question, that after the defeat for the Japanese was obvious, coming and then happening, did Japanese people or soldiers, did they do suicide?
Yeah, some did on Okinawa and also Saipan.
Because
Yeah, so some civilians did.
the
Besides
Japanese mentality and
Mhm.
culture is to win at any price and not to be subdued, and defeat has to be avoided by all means.
Yeah.
So I think, maybe you mentioned, I'm not sure I heard it or not, but I think probably many people did committed suicide.
Yeah, there definitely was some. Yeah, like on Mount Suribachi, there were some Japanese fighters that killed
Right.
themselves once the mountain was taken, and also in other parts of the island as well.
And this is surprising to learn about the land so much. I mean, land, we're talking about the mountain now. And
Yeah.
all, it's very confusing. There's millions of tunnels. And it was a important part for the United States, but it had a big price, we can say
Mhm.
that. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting, very educational. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm sorry everyone that you missed me in the beginning. I really should have tested sharing my screen. I thought it would be no problem, but I guess something came up. There's always glitches that come up with
Oh yeah,
with
that's
Zoom.
like with the computer, there's always something.
Yeah.
But then you repeated it, so that was it was okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyone that's interested, I can share my presentation with you.
In what format would you?
Oh, okay. Well, it's a Google format.
Well, if I have to do much on the computer, then I can't do that. You know.
Okay, then I'll have to do it in person at some point then.
Or no, you could share maybe by email books or titles of.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So this presentation, it can get attached onto an email, so you can
Email.
open up.
I would
Yeah.
be interested in the movies and the books. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do I give you my email address?
Okay. Yeah. So you can just type it into the chat box.
No. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah.
Chat
So
box.
you'll see.
Here at the bottom, right? Or at
Yeah.
the
So
bottom.
next to on
I
my
wrote
screen, it's right next to share screen.
Chat Mac. I wrote the last thing I wrote. This is Eva, no sound. It's right there. I should write.
Yeah, just where it says chat, it's like a little circle.
No, I did clicked on that and there disabled share. That's not what we want. Chat. Okay, well, could you read that previously when I wrote, this is Eva, no sound? Can you read that in the meeting chat? No?
Okay, let me see.
To everyone. Okay, but I don't know how to write this. I see what other people wrote, that no sound and this and that, but I don't see.
Okay, let me get.
Well, I can just spell out the email address. That's it.
Okay, so I can also just write my email in the chat box. We can do it that way.
Okay.
No. Should go to everyone. There we go. There we go.
It should be in the. Oh, is that it? M. Walsh?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you? Mike?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
read it. So M. Walsh at ypl.org.
Yep.
That's it. M. Walsh.
Yeah. So thank you, Judith, for being here. I'm glad that I had a co-host.
Okay.
something that I didn't anticipate.
YPL.org.
Mhm.
So this is your email address. So I write there, then you can send the material. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. As I said in the chat, the details are horrifying,
Yeah.
but
Yes. Yes.
it was an excellent presentation. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I'm
Thank
glad I
you.
found the right buttons to admit everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was crazy because I was talking for like 2 minutes. How many minutes? Like 5 minutes.
And I thought only I am the one who doesn't hear it because I'm not that great with the computer. But then I saw
Yeah.
that others don't hear it. Well, I
Yeah.
would say, why don't you try the Yonkers Library on Central Avenue, the Wills Library?
Yeah, that's where I work. Yeah.
A lot of programs and more. I'm sure many people would be interested. Have you tried of giving the same lecture there?
Yeah, I work at the Wool Library actually.
You do?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm gonna try to maybe do it in person as well at some
Oh,
point.
that's funny. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this was kind of my trial. It's like the first history
Uh-huh.
presentation that I've done,
Yes, yes. They have very
which
good
I think
program. Yes.
if it wasn't for the technology, it would have went perfect.
Oh, that was
So
not terrible. Just first few minutes. That's okay. That's
yeah,
almost normal for me. There is always a problem with the computer.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Okay.
All right. Thanks
Okay.
again, Judith.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, and there'll be a video. Well, I guess there'll be a video if anyone missed this presentation that wanted to watch this presentation. There'll be a YouTube video of it coming online probably sometime next week.
Right. Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Good night.